Alright, hey everybody, I'm back working on the Mustang. Today I got you looking at the roof, because that's what I'm going to be doing. Hey, I'm going to be working on the roof today. We got some holes in here on both sides of the roof. This was a vinyl top car. We're going to put a vinyl top back on it. But the problem is, on your vinyl top there's a seam on both sides, you know, where they fold the vinyl and sew it together. It makes like a, I don't know, a half of an inch wide, 3/4 inch wide seam, and that seam collects water. It holds on to water longer than the rest of the top, so you tend to get rust right down both sides of the roof where the seam on the vinyl top is, and this car has that. Let me take the camera down. We'll go inside the car and look up through the roof, and you can see daylight. You can really see where the problem is. Alright, before I go in the car, here's just a close-up of the driver's side. You can see all these holes and rust craters. This is the worst side. The other side, passenger side's a little bit better. But let's go in and we'll take a look at it from inside. So here we are inside, and you can see the light coming through all of these holes. You know, and that's all of the rusted out spots over here on the passenger side. Again, looks like a bunch of bullet holes. So I have to fix that. So what I'm going to do is, at first I thought I would cut out all of this bad sheet metal and just weld in new stuff, but given my experience on the back of the car here, you know, I'm not going to be able to just cut it out and perfectly fit in new sheet metal. I don't have the ability to do that. This has got a slight curve to it. I can't curve any sheet metal that's going to fit perfectly. So what I've decided to do is, I'm just going to cut around the edges of the really bad spots. I'm going to epoxy on a piece of sheet metal from underneath so that there's a backing where the holes are. I'm kind of hoping that the epoxy, and I'm going to put the epoxy on the top so that it comes out through the holes. And I'm actually going to use the epoxy as a filler. And I'm going to use that JB Weld epoxy, the same stuff you saw me use on the back quarter panel at the wheel well here. And I'm going to put it on both sides, so I'm not going to really do any cutting or welding to try and fix these holes. I think the epoxy is a little more durable. It's a little harder than filler, you know, and maybe it'll absorb, you know, less water going forward. Alright, so I'm done with preparing the holes. They got a little bigger. This is the passenger side. Let me go over to the driver's side. I just had a rat tail file that I went around the edge and just kind of ground out all of the thin, you know, rusty, little rotten metal. Anything that would come out by hand. So the holes got a lot bigger, but that's fine. You know, I want to fix it so that I don't have any trouble with it in the future. So the next step is going to be to cut out some panels that are going to go underneath. Go inside the car here, and you look up, you see all the holes. So the next step is I'm going to make some sheet metal patches that I can put underneath these the roof here and epoxy into place from below. So you can see I cut this piece out to match this pattern of holes that I have, and I've worked this piece so that it pretty much sits nice and flat on the roof. The roof has got a slight curve to it, so I took the time and you know, bent this piece, put a slight curve in it so that it matches the roof, you know, as best as I can get it, just throwing it on here cold. I mean, I think it's pretty good. It fits nice and tight. You know, it's not like if you put your finger on it here, you know, it doesn't, you know, I mean, obviously it comes up a little bit, but it, you know, it's not like it's a flat piece of steel and I'm trying to conform it to this curved surface. This thing has a little bit of a curve to it. I don't know if you can see it. I can feel it. It's got a curve on it. And like I said, when I throw it on top of the roof right in this area, I mean, it sits really nice. So when I go underneath the car, it's going to fit well too. And you know, I have to figure out a way to hold this piece in place when I put the epoxy on it. So I've come up with a what I think is a simple solution. I think it's going to work really well, so let's go take a look at that. So here's the system that I've come up with to hold the plates to the bottom of the roof when I put the epoxy on them. You can see all I did was take a 2x4 and throw it across the sides of the car on top of the door or the rear quarter panel. And I have a little bottle jack inside on top of the 2x4. And I have the bottle jack just really lightly jacked. It doesn't, I'm not trying to, I don't want to push a dent in the roof or anything. And I certainly don't want to mess up my doors or my quarter panel. But it doesn't take much pressure. I'm just working this little pump handle by hand here. I don't even have the arm that the jack comes with. And you can see it does a great job of holding that plate underneath into position where it needs to be. And I have a piece of wood. Let's go inside of the car and I'll show you. I got a piece of wood between the bottom of the jack and the plate just to kind of spread out the pressure of the jack. Alright, so here we are inside the car. Here's the, again, you can see the 2x4 that goes across, and then there's the jack, and I just have a little block of wood and the plate that I'm going to use with the epoxy. This is a dry run. I always do a dry run ahead of doing the actual work, because you always, run into issues at the last second. You don't want to have a bunch of wet epoxy on a piece of steel and then you realize, oh man, I need to get another piece of wood, or the jack's too short. So I always practice. So this is how I'm going to do it. So now we'll mix up some of the JB weld, put it on the plate, stick it to the roof, and see how it goes. Alright, so here we go. I got the epoxy all mixed up, spread all over this plate, and now I'm going to glue it into place. So I'm going to take my little piece of wood, spacer, filler thing, put it underneath. I know I got the jack in the right place because I pre-positioned it. Actually, let me stick this on here without the wood so I can see it better. Make sure I cover up all the holes. Pretty much sticks on perfectly. Put the little piece of wood up here just to help spread out the load from the jack. And I'll just push it like that gently. And, I can see if I push a little hard, the epoxy is almost like a lubricant and it kind of slides around a little bit. So I'm just going to jump out of the car real quick, check and make sure that I have all the holes covered, and I'll take you up top and let you see what it looks like from the top side. Of course, it's the really sunny part of the day, but here it is. You can see that the epoxy has oozed up through the holes, which is basically what I wanted to happen. I'm going to take the little spreading tool that I use to spread it on, and I'm just going to kind of smear these big globs down. That's, I've learned with filler, all of this stuff that you can cut when it's wet, go ahead and do it, because once it gets hard then you have to grind it, and it's a lot harder to grind. Alright, that's it. I'm not going to touch it anymore. I'm just going to let this dry for a few days. So here it is a week later. Time goes fast on video. And you can see how the epoxy has oozed up through the holes in the roof. It's pretty hard, so I'm going to have to try and sand this off or something. But I think it came out perfectly. It sort of oozed up through the holes, which is what I wanted it to do. So here's the underneath shot, and you can see the piece of wood is stuck on there. I'm going to have to knock that off with a hammer or something. I just want to be careful that when I knock that off, I don't loosen or damage the piece of sheet metal. So now the wood's off, and you can see there's a little bit of trace wood here and along this edge. So just those two little edges of wood, of epoxy, we're able to stick that wood piece on there pretty good. I did beat on it pretty hard to get it off, but I'm happy how the patch came out. It's nice and tight to the roof. There are no gaps. The epoxy kind of oozed all the way around the edges, so it's all sealed up. And I already showed you the top. So I'm going to sand the top down with a just a random orbital sander with some like 50 grit paper on it, and see what that does to trying to reduce the size, you know, to knock down those parts of the epoxy that oozed up through the holes. So here I have a random orbit palm sander, kind of like the electric equivalent of a DA. 50 grit paper. Let's see what happens. Here it is. I finished with the random orbit sander. So you can see this one is what I wanted. You know, I got the epoxy up in the holes now. And it's still really rough. It's not because of the epoxy, but because of, you know, all the pitting and the other corrosion in here. So now this is going to be ready for some filler. I'll mix up a little filler and just skim it over this area, and then let it dry, and then sand it down, see how it comes out. And I also whipped out this belt sander with some 40 grit for the patch that I did on the other side of the car, the big long one over here. Just a quick look at the passenger side front patch that I did. This was a long one. It comes all along here, all the way to the front there. Again, I used the random orbit on this a little bit. I'd used the belt sander with some 40 grit, and then I followed it back up with the random orbit just to kind of clean it up a little bit. Turned out well. Again, I like the way that this epoxy oozes up through the holes, and then you can just kind of, you know, flush it out with the roof. Gives you a nice fill in the hole, and it's a lot more durable than filler, and it's a lot easier to do than welding. Alright, so let's go back to the other side. I still have the final set of holes on the driver's side here towards the front to do. And the only thing that I've decided in my experience with these other patches, I'm going to cut the, instead of using one big long piece, I'm going to cut it and pretty much just cover these back 3 big holes, and then I'll go forward and use a little a piece and do those front set of holes. And this piece in the middle here, I'm just going to cut that wedge out. It's a little easier to shove it up against the roof and hold it in place when it's smaller. You know, get a little tighter fit. And, you know, it just makes, you know, you don't need all the epoxy in here. It just kind of drips out everywhere and makes kind of a mess. So I'm just going to cut that one in half and use 2 patches on that one. So this is my roof epoxy adhesive patch repair for these holes. I think it came out good. This is the way I wanted it to look. I'm happy with the result. So thanks for watching. Keep coming back, and we'll be working on the Mustang.